what's happened.
John, did you have another question?
Just so I'm clear on what you're saying, Councilman, you're saying that deficits in this case are okay, is that what you're saying? For this
What I'm
budget?
saying is that they were planned for.
Okay. And so if we continue this pattern, my only concern is if we continue this pattern, next year, how much are we borrowing from reserves to cover our deficits? The year after that, the number just keeps growing. And I'm saying if we, I don't like the words layoff and furlough, but let's be realistic. Most other cities are doing it. Most counties are doing it. And, you know, if we've got to get down that 184,000, I think it will be worth it moving on. It's just fiscally responsible. Keeps that money in the pot.
Well, remember that if you looked at the 2010 budget at this time last year, that deficit was a little bit more than twice that. If you looked at the 2011 budget at the beginning of this year, it was almost 10 times that. So if you look at the trend of reductions in the deficits, instead of just drawing a straight line from where we are today, I think that's as credible a way as looking at what's a realistic outcome for 2013, because we have 2 more years to work through this. And that those numbers are not cast in stone, that those are warnings for what we need to do, and not.
I appreciate that. The one thing that I would say, just in response, is that, you know, the mayor has come to us and said, it's the bottom, this is it. And if we dig any further, we're talking furloughs, we're talking layoffs. And so there's really no more room for this to keep coming down. And that's why I would almost even say, even for the changing subjects, but for the 600,000, just placing money in there for things that we're expecting to spend next year, keeping the rest in general fund, just as a test case to see how that works, because usually when we budget things, we usually come in under budget. So we may even have less money, may have more money in that fund at the end of the year than we anticipated.
And we typically under budget our revenues also. The Paul Lewis's target was, he said, when he budgets revenues, he wants the news to be good 75% of the time. So he's not taking a median projection. He's taking a very conservative projection. And the other thing, and that's the thing that we haven't looked at here at all, is revenue. I mean, we are not ringing the cash register, but we're well ahead of our projections for building permits over what we projected. And that, it's not so much that the permit revenue is large, but the sales tax revenue on the building materials that are delivered to Washougal is large. And so, and there may be other things that we can do to increase our revenue situation. Focusing on expenditures only, I think, is a mistake. And the other thing is that, I mean, we talk about this ER&R fund. If we have if we had a car that cost us $6,000 a year to maintain, we really ought to buy a new one, because it's under warranty and the loan payments on it are $250 a month, maybe $300 a month. But that's for vehicles. When you start talking about people and the cost Remember that if we're self-funded on unemployment, so to save 2 salaries, we have to lay off 3. Not only that, but with an exceptional hiring process, you're lucky if you get, out of the 3 people that you hire, there's 2 that you have or even want to have after 6 weeks. We have a staff now that we like, and the cost of chopping off an arm, actually several arms, to save the cost of one, and then having to go out in 2012 or 13 and replace it, that's really, I think that's really being sensible and dollars foolish.
Yeah, but I think you gotta look at it though from, when I look at a budget from a business standpoint, I don't go off.
So do
what
I.
Well, I don't go off of what I think my revenues might be for the next year. I go off of what my revenues were, and maybe even a little conservative, less than that, when I'm making a budget for my business. It needs to be the same way for government. We can't just go and say, well, we're gonna have a few increases here and make projections for, anticipating these growths in revenue, and then those things don't happen, or a double dip recession sets in, or whatever the other things that could come down the road. I can't do that as a business owner, and I would hope that our government, our city government, would not do that as well.
Well, I would just say that as a business owner and manager, that was certainly not the way that we budgeted. We made reasonable projections on what our revenues would be. And in most cases, we expected increased sales. And because to make those increased sales, among other things, you have to have the materials and the people to produce those things that you want to sell. So if you look at what's going on in corporate America right now, capital expenditures are increasing month over month at certainly not boom rates, but healthy rates. What's not increasing is the employment of people. On the other hand, those are also increasing. And so if you, especially if you're a business person, if you make your projections on the basis of the worst news that you've had recently, then you lock yourself into that. The only way that you can grow is by budgeting for growth. And that's more true of a business than it is of a municipality, but it's still true. And part of the way that we budget for growth is in capital projects and in improved equipment and improved training for our people. Those are all capital expenditures. But the idea that we need to go out and start laying people off, I think that's the last thing, that's absolutely the last thing you do, because it is so expensive, both during and then when you have to reestablish that capital.
Dave?